So our first speaker this morning is Susan Brown. Susan is the Director of IT at Telligent. If any of you are familiar with Telligent in Des Moines, it's one of the organizations that provides services, I think, to Medicaid managed care here in the state. It also provides services as a Medicare contractor. And they do a lot of things. The nice thing about it, if relatively speaking, is she's not going to talk about IT. For those of us that have been like we're in our office who kind of glaze over it, the thought of IT, she's not going to talk about it. So, but she's going to talk about creating a culture of person and family engagement. And the whole idea behind this is to talk about how we as clinics can do one more thing as part of being a patient-centered medical home that will really affect, it can really affect the patients that we care for. So I'm going to turn this over to Susan, and she will bring what she has to share with us this morning. Thank you for being here.
So as Dale said, I live in Iowa. I'm from Waukee. It's a suburb of Des Moines. And I'm amazed that anyone's here on a game day. I thought you all had LinkedIn, so I didn't know who would show up today. So hats off to you for focusing on improving healthcare on a game day here in Nebraska. This room is a bit challenging because I've got people clear over here to the left, clear over here to the right. So I'll try to keep spanning the audience and make eye contact, but if I don't, it's because it's a little bit of a challenge. So anyway, as Dale mentioned, I work for Telligent, and I'm not going to focus on that today, but just as an FYI, we are the data contractor for the CPC Plus program, so I heard you talking about that right when I came in this morning. We also test measures for ACO. We own the measure authoring tool that tests all of the quality measures for what was meaningful use and is now promoting interoperability, as well as ACO measures. So we have our hands on a lot of the alternative payment models that CMS is trying to implement. So if, on a side note, if you ever want to chat with me about any of that, I would be happy to. My contact information is at the end of this presentation. But I'm going to take off my work hat for now, and I want to talk about person-centered care. And you might be thinking, why is this IT person here talking to us about this? Well, I have two special needs kids. They're adults now. And so I've spent a lot of time navigating the healthcare system on their behalf. And I think I have some good success stories to share. And what I really want you to come away with today is maybe a different perspective on patient engagement and some very practical ideas that you can take back to your clinic. I'm a pretty no-fluff person. I don't like a lot of theory. I would rather give you some practical ideas that you can take home. So I'm just going to start with a short video that reminds us of why we're all in the business in the first place. And if someone could maybe dim one of the lights, that would be great. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm also on CMS's National Faculty for Person and Family Engagement. it's a popular one. So I just want to introduce myself and my family. And so I'm a divorced mom of 3. And my kids are Caleb, who's to the right of me. He's 24. He just graduated from law school at WashU in St. Louis. And he got a job with Arthur Cox Law Firm in Ireland, of all places. So he's moving October 7th to Ireland. And then Jessica is 21, and Reese is 20. So I had a really normal life. I went to college, went to graduate school, got married, worked for a while, and then had 3 kids in 5 years. I know, I was appalled too. But Caleb was just fine, and so we didn't recognize at that time that there was a genetic condition in my family. I was the carrier, but I didn't have present any symptoms. My dad was a carrier, my sister and aunt are carriers, and it presented itself in my younger 2 kids. So Jessica and Reese both have the full mutations, what is called a Fragile X syndrome. So this is a lifelong intellectual disability that the kids were diagnosed when Jessica was 3 and Reese was 2. They were diagnosed by Mayo Clinic. And my dad, who's a physician, had never heard of it. I had never heard of it. So when our pediatrician called me, I went home and Googled it and realized that that day my entire life changed. My kids, the dreams that you have for your family change in an instant. I realized at that point that they would not be on a regular path in terms of growing up, going to college, pursuing their own dreams, having their own families, that instead that this would require lifetime care and a lot of tough decisions. So how it manifests itself is the girls that have it are higher functioning. So Jessica has an IQ of 40. I believe normal is somewhere in the 70 to 80. Low end of normal is somewhere 70 to 80. So she's got an IQ of 40. She can read. She'll never drive or manage her own finances. She has a lot of good life skills. And she works at Hy-Vee, our local grocery store. She takes a transportation service to work. Reese, on the other hand, is a lot tougher. He's got an IQ of 9. He's never spoken. He's 20 years old. He's incontinent, and he's had seizures until just a couple of years ago, which I'm going to talk about. But my point in telling you this is just to understand the context that I'm coming from, and the fact that I've spent a lot of time in the healthcare system, because over the last 20 years times 2, these kids have seen, of course, their pediatrician. Reese has a neurologist, a psychiatrist. He's on Risperidone. It's an anti-schizophrenic med, as well as Abilify, and he was on Trileptal for his seizures. And then, of course, over the years, they've seen occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, special needs dentists, special needs eye care providers, and the list goes on and on. And what I have found, just in my 20 years times 2 of navigating the system for them, is that we have worked with amazing providers. So I want to thank you for dedicating your life to this role, because you, meaning the broader provider community, have truly made our lives better than they would have been without you. So I thank you for that. What has been frustrating over the years is that the system is not designed to care for these individuals. We are expected to come into a system and adapt to it versus the system adapting to us. And that's kind of what I want to leave you thinking about today, is how you can become more person-centered. And the reason CMS they're starting to use the word person-centered versus patient-centered, is that really people spend a sliver of their life in the healthcare system. And so we need to consider the whole person when we're talking about someone's health and healthcare. So patient-centered is kind of moving to person-centered care, but anyway, semantics. So the last thing I want to say on this is that, you know, the kids are happy, they're doing well, but this whole experience really forced me at a fairly young age. So I was 32 when the kids were diagnosed. And I think that's pretty early to grapple with these sort of life-changing issues. And it's something that no one can ever take away from me. So in that sense, I'm thankful for the lessons. So it forces you to really look at what is life about and why are you here? You ask yourself these questions. And how can you reconcile the fact that these kids will never, you know, in our way of thinking, you know, achieve the fullness of being able to make their own decisions and live a full life. And, you know, I don't want to sound preachy, you don't have to agree with this, but what it helped me wrestle through is the fact that this life is temporary, that this life is short. And I'll make the best decisions that I can each year on their behalf, but I truly believe that they are both deposits in heaven. I don't think that they'll be held accountable because they don't have the capacity to make those kind of decisions. And I do know that someday I'll have long conversations with Reese, my youngest, about life. So anyway, that's how I come to terms with it. And I actually worry much more about my oldest son because he has the ability to choose the path for his life. And I want him to choose well. So anyway. So what is person and family engagement? I don't usually like starting presentations with definitions, but I actually really like the definition that CMS has put out for person and family engagement because they say patients and families are partners in defining, designing, participating in, and assessing the care of the practices and systems that serve them. And I just want to hone in on that for a minute. Because I don't think that doing a patient satisfaction survey and looking at your CAP score really captures the essence of this definition. And I want to ask you as SERPA-ACO and as clinicians and as human beings, are you really partnering with patients and families in the design of the care that you provide? Not just assessing the care after the fact, but partnering with them in defining, designing, participating in, and assessing the care that's provided. I think that's a way bigger scope of work than just doing a patient satisfaction survey and taking a glance at the results. And then beyond that, are you partnering with them to ensure that you're being respectful of and responsive to individual patient preferences, needs, and values? Now, I realize that you can't cater to every single person, every single niche request, but there are similarities among things that would really help patients and families as they navigate the healthcare system. So here's another definition. I really wish my doctor would quit asking me so much about my life. The office is always bothering me about what's working well or not so well for me and my family. They keep increasing the use of technology to make things more convenient, like banking has, but I'd rather play phone tag. They said they want me as part of the team to share in the decisions and to improve our experience. It's almost like a customer service approach. This is healthcare, not Amazon. So who said this? Well, no one. So that's the opposite of, I think, what most patients and families would want. So I'm going to tell you 4 of these success stories that I mentioned that I personally experienced with my kids, and I don't expect these to all be replicated within your own practice. I'm just trying to give you a flavor as to some of the ideas that I'm talking about. And my 4 stories are these. And they're pretty simple, nothing rocket science. So my first story has to do with care coordination. And I just have to say that to take Reese to any appointment is a major endeavor. And I love that video that I showed at first because it demonstrates that none of us ever really know what's going on in someone's life when they present for a visit. Just like I don't know what's going on in your lives. I mean, you are human beings with families, with your own health issues, with the financial pressure that you face trying to keep your practices thriving. And I have no idea the pressure that you face day to day. And just like you don't know what it's taken me to even get to the doorway of an office visit. So when I take Reese in for a visit, what typically happens is I have to pull him out of his dehabilitation program, which is his routine, it's his happy place. I have to pull him out of there. He doesn't understand why. It disrupts his day. I take time off work. We go to a building where it's even hard to get him out of the car because he doesn't know why we're at this strange building. He doesn't like to walk through the doorway if he doesn't know what's on the other side. Special needs people, if you know, they love routine. They love to know what to expect. So even getting him in through the doorway is hard, and then I often have to deal with his toileting needs since he's incontinent. And if he's hungry, I always bring snacks in his backpack. So it is a major endeavor just to get him to a visit. And then typically I'm handed either a clipboard, not so much clipboards these days, more like an iPad, to scroll through about 25 screens and verify all this information that I feel like I just verified like 2 months ago, while trying to juggle him walking around the office, back and forth, pacing, wanting to leave. Okay, so then after we've waited for some unspecified amount of time, we don't know whether it will be 5 minutes or 30 minutes, we have to walk through more doorways where he's expected to stand on a scale. Well, he doesn't know what a scale is, or why he needs to stand on it, or that he has to stand still when he's on it, or it won't take a reading. He doesn't understand a blood pressure cuff that squeezes his arm. So usually he's not compliant, and they say non-compliant in his record. Then he's taken to another room with a cold metal table with squishy white paper on it, and he doesn't like that, so he sits on the floor. And the provider comes in, and it's basically a conversation with me about the situation. They do what they need to do, adjust his meds, or tell me he's fine, come back in 6 months or 3 months, and we leave. And so that is not a fun experience for me or for him. And I just, the provider has no clue what it's even taken me to get there, just like I have no clue what your day has been like either. So my story about care coordination is that Reese needed outpatient surgery a couple of years ago, and I was just dreading the whole thing because, it just is not his thing. So I had the pre-op phone conversation, and it occurred to me that while Reese was sedated, that this would be an amazing opportunity to just descend on him and do a bunch of stuff that normally is very difficult. So when I got off the phone after the pre-op call, I called the office manager back and I said, okay, I know you're gonna say no, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but could we see if anesthesiology would keep Reese sedated after his procedure? Because there's a bunch of stuff I'd like to do. Like I'd like my brother-in-law to come in and cut his hair, and I'd like to shave him without him pulling away from me, and cut his nails. And could we have phlebotomy come in and do his blood draws for his seizure meds, because it takes like 3 people to hold him down. And by the way, could I call my dental hygienist, because he could really use like a thorough cleaning. He never complies at the dentist. So she said, okay, well, I'll talk to the anesthesiologist about it. I fully expected them to say no, and she talked to him, and he has a special needs family member. So he agreed to do it. He said, sure, no problem. So I came in with a team that day on his outpatient surgery, and he literally had 8 different services, including personal hygiene and dental care, that would have taken 8 different visits he had in that one visit. with no stress to him. It made me feel respected and part of the healthcare team. And I know the providers left that day with a lot of joy in their work. So that's my story about care coordination. I don't expect that could be replicated, but it's just an example of an office that didn't say, oh, we don't do that here. We've never done things like that, because patients don't do that. So care coordination, that's one thing. Use of technology. So Reese's meds are very strong, especially his Risperdal. And I noticed about 6 months ago, he was having an eye rolling effect. His eyes would roll up and then fixate. And the provider called it, I think, dystonia, a dystonia effect of the med. So I noticed him doing it. I was documenting how many times it was happening a day. And I called the office and I said, if I can capture an iPhone video of this happening, could I send it to you? So the nurse said, sure. She gave me her email address. So he was in his bedroom, and I saw it happening. I took a 3-minute iPhone video. I had the email address written down on a notepad in the kitchen. I went, without even opening my computer, I sent it to her directly from my iPhone. Within an hour, she had shown it to his neurologist. She agreed that it was this dystonia effect from the meds. She e-prescribed into Hy-Vee, our pharmacy, half the dosage he had done. And we tried that for 2 weeks. The eye effect went away. His behavior did not worsen. That was the fear that if we start drawing back his meds, that then his behaviors would increase. So all of that happened with a simple iPhone. I didn't have to pull him out of day hab. We didn't have to take the day off work. We didn't have to go through that whole process that I said of taking him to a visit. So that's a simple use of technology that if I could give them a customer satisfaction rating for that, it would be through the roof. We did a change of meds that made an impact on my son's life and my life with a 3-minute iPhone video. That's my use of technology story. Okay, so a better environment. So, I've been at this a long time. Reese is 20. And so I've worked with his main provider. She's a pediatric neurologist and psychiatrist to create a better environment for Reese so that these visits aren't what I described initially. And what she's done is they have 12 exam rooms in their office. And they have taken one of those exam rooms and created what we call a sensory room. So this room, they have turned off the fluorescent light and put in a lamp. Okay, a lamp that costs $10 at Target. Instead of an exam table, it has a couch. I don't know where the couch came from, but it's not an exam table. They also put in a blanket, in a basket, and some books. And just that environment, they allow me to put some music on my iPhone when we're there that he likes. And he walks right in now. I don't have any trouble getting him into the office. He sits on the couch. The staff comes to him to take his vital signs and do what they need to do. He basically walks through the door, plops down on the couch. The environment isn't overstimulating, it's calming, and a win for him is actually a win for the provider, because now he's much more compliant. They're able to accomplish their checklist of things that they need to do, and he's calm and happy. And that really didn't take a lot of time or expense. They actually use that sensory room for a lot of kids that have ADHD and other disorders. So a better environment. And my last story is on cost savings. I feel like sometimes providers think that consumers or patients are isolated from the whole cost issue. You're not the only ones that struggle with it. So my company, where I've worked for 21 years, we're self-insured. So what that means is my company pays our medical claims directly. Okay, so if I go to the doctor and it's $100, my company writes the doctor's office a check for $100. Now we're reinsured for catastrophic things, but basically my company pays for all of our medical claims. We're self-insured. So you better believe that that puts a burden on me, knowing that my son, when he was on seizure medication, it was $1,200 every 3 weeks for his bottle of Trileptal. And my company's paying that directly. Now, if he needs it, that's fine. But I have become an expert on my kid's condition over time, just like you would be with any of your family members. And I had learned at a conference that my kids would outgrow seizures during adolescence. So Reese had gone a year without a seizure, and I approached his doctor and said, could we try tapering him off of the Trileptal? It's very expensive. He said, well, it's not that expensive. And I said, well, it's $1,200 every 3 weeks. He didn't believe me. He called his pharmacist while I was there in the office and verified. The pharmacist said, oh my gosh, that stuff is outrageous. So he agreed to try a tapering plan. Within 4 weeks, Reese was off of the med. And again, I don't expect the providers to be experts on every nuance of my kid's condition. I really don't. There's too much information out there. You can't be experts on everything. That doctor needed me on the team to tell him that little fact, that the kids would Fragile X kids outgrow seizures when they hit adolescence. I'm convinced that to this day, Reese might still be on the seizure meds if I hadn't said anything, because the doctor didn't want to change his meds because he said we don't like to disrupt people's medication therapy during adolescence. In that 2 years, if you do the math, it has saved my company over $24,000 just from a 5-minute conversation. So we as patients and caregivers, we are interested in cost savings, just like you are. Okay, so moving on. So how do we take these stories and these concepts and create a culture of patient-centered care? So I have some theories, and we're going to talk about how you can put these theories into practice. And my theories are, number one, you've got to be asking patients and caregivers for their input. Your engagement efforts have to go beyond patient satisfaction surveys. You need to ask patients and caregivers to be part of the team. Number two, it has to be systematic. It can't just be, oh, when I think of it, I will. You have to build it into your processes. We all know if we don't build things into our routines, they just don't happen. Number three, consider adding patients to your current committees or initiatives, and I'll give you some examples of that. Number four, activate patients and caregivers. They are truly your best resource. In this world of value-based care, you can only do so many QI projects. You can only do so many lean projects. You can only do so much from a provider end to bend the cost curve and improve care. At some point, to really achieve change, we have to do things differently. It's that quote, insanity is expecting different results, doing the same thing over and over. Unless we start activating patients and caregivers, we'll never handle the rising costs and the crisis that our healthcare system is in. And then number five, redesign your practice to be more patient-centered. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to participate here because you're probably really tired of hearing me talk at this point. So let's turn this theory into a practice. So I want you to just talk amongst yourselves at your table and see if you can come up with a couple of ways that you could put this into practice. How could you ask patients and caregivers to be part of the care team or be more involved in decisions at your practice? Just take like a minute or two and see if you can come up with anything. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. Right, so first, patient and family advisory councils or PFACs. Those are an amazing way to get feedback. Sometimes that notion is intimidating to practices to set up, but there are some great case studies about the benefits of doing so and so many resources available to get one started. I would really suggest trying it. It's okay if it fails. So, Patient Family Advisory Council, sure. What else? Other ideas?
We had come up with an idea that, like with our special needs or dementia or nursing home patients that maybe come in with staff at their facility, that family doesn't come with them, then to maybe have our nurses call and engage family to come in with that patient at their neck so we can see what concerns they have, because typically the staff that comes in to just sit with them knows nothing about
Right.
their care.
As a caregiver, I love that idea. And how about the notion of maybe calling that person ahead of time to create an agenda for the visit? I would love if any of my doctor's offices ever called me in advance and said, what are your goals the next time you're here? What are the 3 things we need to cover while you're here? And we pre-plan an agenda for the visit. I think that's a great idea.
Well, at the end of even not special needs patients, or the doctor can say, now are you going to do this? Does this sound like something that's reasonable to you, or are you just nodding at me to, you know, like I'm going to prescribe this med, are you going to go to the pharmacy to fill it? And if you're not, then we're going to do something else. You know, just,
Right, and I'm not sure it's exactly what you're saying, but there's the concept of teach back. When you give instructions to a patient and then you ask them to, repeat back to me what you heard, or can you tell me, what you just heard me say, and see if they can grasp the concept. But that's different than the willingness to do it. Right? Yeah.
And patients who are genuinely homebound and they age of doing nursing home visits, where we bring the nurse and draw blood and do their plus see their own environment is
Yes, I've heard of groups that actually contract with agencies that do those home visits as well. So we definitely want to keep people out of the ED and out of the hospital readmissions. So the more we can do at home, that's a benefit for the patient and for your healthcare system. I've had this crazy idea of, it's so hard to get Reese into the office. I would love if my clinic had like a drive-up flu clinic. Why do I have to make an appointment to take him in for his flu shot? I'd rather just drive up, sign a piece of paper, and have them reach in the window and stab him in the arm. Drive off. And I've heard, I was in Oklahoma this week for work, and a pediatrician came up to me and said, we actually have a provider that has a difficult patient, and if it's just a medication refill, in other words, she doesn't need to do a physical exam, that happens yearly, but in between the medication refills, the mom sits in the car, the doctor goes out, lays eyes on the patient, and sits in the car and talks to the mother, because a lot of these visits for me just end up being an interview of me. And so the kid can sit there with their iPad, they don't have to even go in to the office. I said, I'm going to use that story Saturday. That she told me this provider just goes out to this mom's car, sits in the car, and does what she needs to do to do the medication refill. So. If you want to implement drive-up flu clinics, I might even drive over. Yeah.
We talked about how so often you can't identify who has special needs necessarily just by how they present in your office, because you do have the people that are like higher functioning.
Right.
So asking just up front, are there any accommodations that we can make for you, or for mom, or whoever it is?
Right.
And then maybe offering some, this is what we do for some other people, because a lot of patients don't even know that we are able to be flexible, so they don't think to ask. So unless we kind of prompt that, a lot of times the conversation doesn't even start.
Right, and I appreciate that a lot, because I can tell you in 20 years, I've never had a practice ask me, what really works for you here? And what doesn't work for you, and what can you do better? It's always me that initiates it. I've never been asked, and we're high utilizers. We're frequent flyers. So we would be the perfect people for someone to say, could you sit down with us for 10 minutes and just tell us your experience here, what works, what doesn't work? I heard of a practice that actually gave some of their patients iPads and asked them during their waiting room and during their visit to take pictures of what they liked and didn't like. about the environment. So I don't like this poster, it's creepy. I do like this sign-in sheet. It was very easy because I just had to push it in, so take pictures of what they liked and didn't like, and then the nurse would scroll through